Hey, Alan.
Hey Kelsey, how are you doing?
Good. Good to see you again.
Yes, I realized that I was muted.
No, you're good. Just sitting over there talking to yourself.
Yep,
I do
always a
that all
fun
the
thing to
time.
do.
I know. I do that all the time. I think you'll have pretty good attendance. I've heard from a number of students, hey Corey, that they're just really excited about SQL and want to learn more.
Well, I am excited to destroy their excitement.
I know they might like immediately change their minds.
We'll get look. We're gonna settle them in. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna explore some metabase. We're gonna just talk about SQL in general. We got some good things to be discussing here.
Oh my goodness. Hey Lily, hey Preston.
Hey,
How's it going?
good.
Good, good. I think Kingston is like stuck in the waiting room. It says that he's joining, but he's like in limbo right now. I don't know what's going on. Oh, anyway, y'all having a good Wednesday? I'm ready for this
Yes, ma'am.
week to be over. I'm exhausted. So were any of you guys off for Juneteenth, or were y'all still expected to intern today? Or I don't know, y'all have different schedules, I know.
I'm just remote on Wednesdays. Most people didn't get off today because they have a giant MLB thing going on.
Oh, that sounds fun. Is that something at Regents Field?
Yes, ma'am. But
Cool.
they're having dinner at the EDPA office, so I'm going remote Thursday so that they can make room for that.
They don't want you there.
It'd just be easier for me to do my work when there's not 1,000, like 200 people there.
But I thought that like was the work of EDPA, right? Like it's just being there and talking to people and you know.
It is, it's just there are people that are focused on talking to EDPA and planning stuff with them, and then also watching baseball. So it's just not the right time for me to talk to them.
Yeah. And probably a little hard to focus. I could see that. Hey Irene. Hey Noah. Hey Anton. I see you here too. Mm-mm-mm. Well, you guys are in for a treat today. Gonna learn a little bit about SQL. We've got a fantastic presenter, Mr. Alan Ridgway.
I won't go that far, but
Fantastic. The best of the best.
of the ones that were available, I
Yeah, that's it. Oh man. Well, we'll give everybody maybe one more minute and then I'll let Alan just take it away.
all right.
But yeah, I think we'll have a few more people join because I really have gotten a bunch of emails and messages saying that, I'm real excited about SQL and want to learn it. And Irene, you had a good question. Do you need to download any type of program or do you need anything for this workshop? But I think Alan's maybe going to direct y'all to some helpful
Yeah,
resources
I was
and
about to
stuff.
say, there will be one kind of link that I'll give that like an exercise we can go through, and then there's a couple of different options in terms of like if you guys want to go and do some of the stuff on your own that we'll talk about. But the goal of today is kind of for me to walk you guys through just the basics and understanding, and then I'm going to uh, kind of peel back the curtain on what we're doing in terms of using SQL, and so you guys will get to see some of that from our end.
That sounds great. And I see Kingston just joined us. That's good. I'm glad he was able to get through the waiting room. Kind of just hung up there for a minute. Um, all right. Well, you know what? It's 12:02. I say go ahead and take it away, Alan. And as people come in, they can just, figure it out and watch the recording if they miss anything.
Okay. Sounds perfect. Well, hello everyone. My name is Alan Ridgway. I am the data scientist, data analyst for QuantHub. And I'm here today to give you guys just a brief rundown of kind of how I got here in terms of being a data scientist, and then sort of what that entails, and then introduce you guys to SQL. So for those that haven't met me, I was a former teacher. I taught at Chelsea High School in Shelby County. I taught math, so I taught algebra 2, geometry, statistics, calculus, those kinds of things. And then when COVID hit, I had the opportunity to go back to grad school and get my degree in business analytics. And so I went and did that, and that kind of just taught me a lot about what it means to be able to look at data, find data, analyze data in different ways. Once I finished that internship, I went and worked for FedEx for a little bit, and now have ended up at QuantHub. And so I've kind of been all over the place in terms of different jobs, different areas. And data has kind of always been the thing that has driven me in terms of either making decisions in whatever job it is, or now my entire job deals with data. So to give you a brief rundown on what a data scientist or data analyst does, they use data in order to answer questions, and then they present basically their findings to people. And so that second piece is a very big aspect of it. Growing up, I'm sure you guys have at least heard the term analyst before. If you haven't, analyst just means to analyze. And so there was a period in time in which someone's job would just be to crunch numbers, find an answer, and then send it to somebody. But the skill that was missing there was the ability to actually present and talk about the data or the answers themselves. And so that's where my background in teaching has kind of really helped evolve to get me to where I am, because I have spoken in front of groups before, and therefore can feel a little more comfortable in terms of being able to talk about what it is that I'm finding. And so that's kind of the piece that shifts from the data analyst to the data scientist in a lot of ways. It's just the idea of being able to present and talk about. Any job that you're going to do is going to deal with data in some way. And a lot of jobs you're going to have are going to deal with being able to talk about whatever it is that it is you're working with, whether it is the data or the background or the customers or the product, whatever it is. Being able to speak on what it is that you do is going to be very important in terms of being able to push your career forward. So now that I've gotten that little piece out of the way, we can kind of transition into SQL. So in terms of analyzing data, there's a lot of different platforms that you guys either have experienced with or will experience at some point in your life. I'm sure most of you have used Excel before. Excel is kind of the basic intro way in order how people start to analyze data. There's those formulas that's like the sum, the average, just plus minus, like that's kind of the basic intro into how you can actually analyze data. And the next step up in a lot of ways from Excel is kind of SQL. And so what I will do here is I have a short little PowerPoint. By short, I mean it's like 3 slides. And then I'm going to take you guys into how we're actually utilizing this. And so let me know if you guys can see the intro to SQL little slide here.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to give you guys a brief introduction to SQL. Here we go. So what is SQL? So SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language, is the language for interacting with data stored in multiple tables. These tables, when they come together, are generally referred to as a database. And so what SQL allows you to do is take a bunch of different tables in one database and kind of analyze them. The way that we analyze them is with what is known as a query. So a query is just a request for data from a database. So when you're actually pulling the information, you're actually gaining it, you're doing that using a query. We'll talk through what a query looks like here in just a second. But in terms of SQL, the way I always like to think about it is if you have an Excel, like if you just open up Excel, you can have a bunch of different sheets. In a lot of ways, a table is an individual sheet in Excel. And the database would be the entire workbook. So for example, pull that over here. If I'm just looking, this was actually data that I was running for how long it's taking people to actually get through our skills. So if I have a table here that we'll call this the skills table. And I had this table here, the time taken to complete. What SQL allows me to do is interact quickly between these two tables. The same way that you could do if you were to reference, say, D3 on this, and let's
Alan,
go, sure.
Alan, are
D2.
you showing a table right now? Because we can't
Oh,
see.
was I?
It's
I
just
think I
what
was
is-
trying to. Let me, thank you for that. Let me, share. Sorry, let me. Here, can you see everything now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, let me, what I was trying to kind of explain, when we have multiple tables, I think there's multiple sheets. So if we have this skills table here, and then we have this time taken to complete table, what SQL allows us to do is kind of interact between these two the same way that you could if you just referenced and you were using Excel generally. So let me pop back over now to our presentation. So I wanted to give you guys kind of an idea of what a basic SQL query looks like before we go into Metabase and you guys actually see how it's used to interact. There are basically 6 parts that can go into a basic SQL query. The one that will always be there is the select. So the select is how you begin every SQL query. And the select is just you listing the columns that you want to view. We then have the from. The select and the from are the only two that will always be there. So the from gives you the name of the table that you're pulling from. So when we look at Metabase, you guys will see there's 100 different tables with 100 different names. The select references the columns. The from references the actual table. The next piece that we would have is a where statement. So the where just allows us to filter the columns. So if you think about a table that is cities and states, the where column could be like where state is equal to Alabama. Like I only want to see the results where the state is Alabama. We can also group by a column. Think about pivot tables in Excel that allow you to kind of group things either by age, race, whatever you're looking at, sex, or even just like what we'll look at is our individual skills. So if I want to group by a skill, you can group by in order to analyze different types of things. Having is a tricky one. Having is the most, I'd say the least common of the 6. The way I think about it, having is just a where clause on the group by. They are done differently and you have to keep them separate. So when you think of having, all it is filtering on whatever you group by. And the last piece is our order by. So the order by just allows you to either in ascending, descending order, lets you set the way it's going to be viewed. And you can order by a particular column or a particular output. But those are kind of the 6 basic features that go into this. Does anybody have any questions on any of these 6 before we go and actually look at them? I want to give you guys some time to either write down, take pictures, think about, and then ask any questions you have before we keep going.
So would you just type these in and then enter what you're looking for?
Exactly, and I'm going to show you guys what it looks like when we're actually using these. And I'll go ahead and say there's more than these 6. This is just the main 6. And when you guys are like, especially we're introducing you to SQL, these are by far the 6 most common things that you'll see. Each serve their own purpose. And so the way that we would use them is we would type in whichever ones particular we needed for that thing. Only things to remember is the select and from are the only 2 that we will always use. So do we feel good to kind of transition into Metabase and kind of see what SQL looks like for QuantHub? Let me here stop sharing real quick so I can get everything pulled up. Alrighty. So this is Metabase. Metabase is a data storage platform, meaning that we pay them to hold our data, and then we can access that data using SQL. I brought you guys here to this Browse Data tab, and you guys will see there's 5 different areas that we can go into. These are 5 different databases. So we kind of have our sample database, and when we click in, what you'll see is we have, in this case, 8 different tables. These tables each have different names when you click into them. So let's go into orders. You can see that this table has columns, so an ID, a user ID, product ID, and so on. So this is how the structure of any kind of SQL storage holding will be. We will have the section for the databases. When you look at an individual database, you'll see a list of tables. And when you click on a particular table, so where's responses? Responses. You'll see information in that table. Now, we use SQL in order to group these tables together and be able to pull out answers for questions that we have. And so if I just here go to new SQL query, and let's use here the staging. I said that we have select and from are 2 big ones. So if I want to look at the response data, let's go, I want to select all of the user IDs, user ID, from the response table. Responses, yeah. So I would have select user ID from responses. I put a semicolon at the end just to help remind me this is where it's ending. This is not required, but it is recommended. And then I just run the query. And I get a list of all of the user IDs from the response table. If I wanted to look up more than one column, I would just put a comma in between. So let's go. Yeah, let's go. And then I think, is it called is correct? Nope. We'll do it that in a second. So if I wanted to look at user ID and skill ID, I would have user ID, comma, skill ID. And see, it pulls up 2 columns, user and skill. The other important piece of information to know, and I use this every time I run a query because it helps remind me what things are called. If you put a star, so if I put select star from responses and I run the query, it pulls up every column. So generally speaking, when I do a query, I always start with select star because then I can actually see what the columns are named. And this allows me, so if I want to look at user ID, let's go skill ID. And let's go difficulty. Oop. And then is correct. I wanted to look at these 4. Doing the star allows me to easily see what all of my options are. And then I can go back in and limit them. So I mentioned that we have our big 6. So let's go in and say I only want to look at columns where the difficulty is equal to 3. So I have select these 4 columns from responses where difficulty is equal to 3. Run the query. I now only have the ones where difficulty are with 3. So we have our base. The where allows us to quickly filter for a particular item. Instead of a where, I want to talk about now the group by, because this is probably the most common thing that I end up using. Because when you group by, it allows you to get things like count. So let's say here, I want to know how often people are getting questions right or wrong based on the difficulty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group by difficulty. And first, I just want to see how many questions are being answered. So I'm going to do a count here of is correct, which is firm responses group by difficulty when I run it.
I like how Metabase says it's doing science.
It is. It is. And so generally the group bys are going to take longer because it's just more work that it's happening on the back end. What you end up seeing here is the amount of questions that are being answered per difficulty. Let's say I only wanted to know the ones that were correct. Easy enough. I put back in a where clause, so select from where is correct equals true. I can rerun the query, and it only gives me the response data and only gives me the numbers for the answers that are actually correct. So does anyone have any questions on these first four? Either select from, the where, or the group by.
Yeah, I have a question. So how would you know maybe what you're actually looking for? If you have a huge database like this, if you don't know the fields that you're trying to find, is there maybe a key or a guide? And same with all the user IDs. You have a bunch of numbers, but
Yep.
what does that really mean?
So, great question. I'll take you back here. Let's just go back to our data. So, a job in the main job, and I think we have Evangeline on the call. She'll probably agree with this. The main job, it feels like, of the either data scientist, data analyst, is to be able to know what data you have and where it is. And so if I'm looking into Metabase and I am asked a question about our user history and or our company history, when you go into the different tables, you can search through and find the ones that reference that particular thing. So if I want to know about the users, I can go to the users table. I can get information about them. A very common one that we'll look at is our companies table. This is just the different companies that QuantHub is with. We call everything a company, so you'll see schools on here. For us, any group is called a company. And then if we want to know the association between users and companies, well, we have a table for that that's called the company authorizations table. And so a job of the data analyst is to be able to know what data you have and where you can access it. It's going to be different for every single job and every single company that you work with, and it's even different across databases. So if I were to look in one of the other five, it's not always going to be exactly the same. These two will be just because they're basically the same thing. But we have like our hiring platform, and the way that everything is set up is slightly different. And so when it comes to being able to navigate inside of the database, it really comes down to you knowing what different tables are in there and knowing how they work together. Speaking of working together, I want to kind of give you guys a glimpse into the power of SQL in terms of being able to actually being able to get more information out of just what you can see in one table. So the way that I'm going to do this first, because this is how I basically will always do stuff. So let's go select star from responses. In this case, I only want to know the skill ID and then whether a question is correct or not. So I'm going to select skill ID and is correct. Having this is nice, obviously, but when I'm looking at this information, I don't know what skill ID means. Like, I don't know what, 916 of skill ID is. I just know that in our database, we have it as 916. And so what I'm going to show you here, let's go back to our database. If I want to get a better understanding of what the skill ID is, then I need a table that's going to actually give me more information about it. And so when I look through, I see that we have a skills table. And what I can see is we have an ID and then a name. What SQL is best used for is to be able to actually combine different tables in order to show me more information. And so I want to see the name instead of the ID. So what I will do is I'll go to this from piece. So I want to join to the skills table. So it always goes after the from. And I want to join the skills table. Now, the important piece you guys need to know when joining, there has to be a connection to allow it to be joined. In this case, from the responses table, I have the skill ID column. And when I look at the skills table, it's just called ID. So I want to join on response.skill.id equals skills.id. And what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to return everything, just so you guys can see what it looks like. And so what you'll see here on the left, this is the response piece. And on the right, this is all of the skills data associated with. So before I actually go any further, does anybody have any questions on this join step? This is by far the most complicated thing that we've looked at. It's also the most important piece when it comes to actually being able to use SQL. So are there any questions on how I combined the response in the skills table?
Can you make it to where only a couple columns join?
Yes. And so the way I can do that is I can just list here which columns I want. So let's say from the responses table, I want, let's just go difficulty. Let's go is correct. And I'll actually also pull the user ID. Notice when I have more than one table, I'm having to tell SQL which table this column comes from. So I say responses.userid, responses.difficulty, responses.iscorrect. And all I really care about from the skills table is the name of the skill. Because instead of pulling skill ID, I'm going to actually pull the name of the skill. So these are the four that I'm keeping. Notice the order is always going to be the same. I put skills.name first, so that is the first one that appears. I don't know about you guys. Sometimes it's not the easiest because obviously when I'm looking at the skills table and I see name, I know that this is skill name. But here, when I'm just seeing name, I don't necessarily know what it is. And so you can actually change the name that it's going to look like by using an as statement. So let's say I want it to return skill name. So skills.name as skill name. When I rerun it, notice skill name here is at the top. This doesn't change anything about the actual data. It just changes what the output looks like. Okay. Why is this not wanting to work for me? Okay. Here we go. That would be the equivalent of going in here to skill ID and renaming this skill ID. Notice none of the actual data changes. It's just the name of the column that changes. And so the as statement basically just makes it cleaner and easier to visually see. The last piece on this that I'll mention, you can join to more than one table. Notice here I have user ID. What if I don't really want the ID? I want the actual name of the person, or we can use the email. So we have a users table, the same way that we had a skills table here. When I went back into users, there's an ID for the user ID. And so I can join on responses.user ID equals users.id. And if I wanted the email to be able to reach out to whoever it was, boom. I have users.email here. And so this would be the email attached to that user. And since I haven't really shown this yet, order by always goes at the very end. And so let's order here by difficulty. Whoop. And I just want it to be descending. So this one gives descending. You could also set it to be ascending. And then an important piece, you don't necessarily have to type ascending or descending. There's a default. And so if I didn't type either, it just sets to the default, which is ascending. And so I typed it out so you guys saw it, but if it's not there, it defaults to ascending. The only one that you have to specify is you have to specify descending. Does anyone have any questions in
I
terms
do.
of kind of what you've looked at and seen?
Could you show us an example where you use having?
Yeah, sure. So let me here think of a good one real quick. So what I'm going to do. So this is what I'm going to do. Comma, count from responses. The nice thing about Metabase is I can type out multiple things at once. So let me actually just start with here from the beginning so you guys can kind of see. So as a reminder, this is what the response table normally looks like. For a having clause, what I want to look at is I'm going to group by user. So I want to see how often is a user answering a question. So we'll just start with that basic thing. I want to know how often is a user answering a question. And so in order to have a having, you have to have a group by. So notice here, I'm going to group by user ID and then just get a count of all of the rows in which we see a user ID appear. So we see our user ID and we see our count. A having clause is you want to filter based on this count. So let's name this as responses. Make it a little cleaner. So we have our user ID, we have a number of responses. Well, I want them to have a count that is greater than 100. And when I run this, you'll see it filtered out all of the ones that were below 100, only leaving the ones above. You can also combine where and having. That gets into more complicated types of things. But in terms of the difference between a where clause and a having is always going to be associated with either a count or a sum or an average. It's something that you're actually getting when you group by. And a where clause would be like where user ID is greater than, let's just go 12,000. So notice here I have user IDs in the 12,000s and the 13,000s. If I include that where clause on the user ID, oh, that's what I need to do, sorry. Greater than 13,000. I only grab the user IDs that are greater than 13,000. So great question, but that's the difference between our where and our having. Does anyone else have any kind of quick questions on these before we transition to kind of going through some of these exercises together?
Is this like, okay, so this use case scenario would be like if somebody asks you to find certain data, but what if, is it connected to like ID cards where you scan your ID card and then you can find the data based off of your ID?
Yes, so the way that you can do that is you would need to set it in the where clause. So let's say I wanted to look for a particular user ID. What I could do here is let me find myself. Oh. Which one do we want to look at? I will look at the bottom one. Okay, so my personal user ID is 21850. Oop. Oop. Select star from responses. When you're using SQL, the only way you really can filter is by having something in the where clause. So if there's someone in particular I want to look up, so for instance, myself, this would be all of the response data associated with my QuantHub email. You could have them in a group. So let's say I wanted all the responses where the user ID was in this list. Instead of an equals, I just have in. And that would run it, and that would get all the user IDs. Maybe I'm the only one on this magical list. Oh, no, here's 5-3. But when it comes to does that answer your question in terms of from like the ID standpoint? There really isn't a way of, like, there's certain data that you have access to, but when it comes to filtering, it always comes from the where clause in terms of being able to look at something in particular.
Yeah.
All right, is there any other questions you guys have in terms of building, your basic queries and then the different times that you would use different features? All right,
I have a
well,
question. I have a question. Could you give us an example where you used SQL to like find information for your today job?
so in terms of SQL to find information in that regard, SQL just deals with data that's in a database. So in terms of what SQL allows you to do, it can only deal with the information that's in that particular database. Anything that you want outside of that sphere, you would need a different kind of platform for. The most common one, I mean, if you want to use something like ChatGPT potentially, but I think you're probably thinking more of stuff that like C++ or Python could do in terms of things outside of the sphere of a database. SQL just deals, it'd be the equivalent of if I'm working in Excel, I only have the data in the file. And so SQL only deals with whatever data is in the database.
In the comments, Alan, somebody said, can you give a real life example? And I would say maybe just talk about how you run reports for a lot of people on our team. I know
Oh.
that's been really helpful for me, is having those automated reports to help with my job.
Yeah, and so here let me stop sharing my screen so I can make sure to find an example that doesn't have information or particular information. But all right, here we go. So I'll give you guys a peek into one of the tables that we're using here. This is how we looked at different classroom activity, but we basically every week would pull up this report and be able to determine what is going on with different classrooms and what responses we need to have because of that. When you go here, when I look into the open editor, this was the SQL query that went into building all of this. Do not worry about everything associated with the SQL query. There is a lot of stuff going on, but here, let me see if I can blow up my. Is that easier for you guys to see?
Yes.
If we just look into this bottom piece here, the piece that I'm highlighting, notice I have a select where this is the different tables that I'm selecting. I have a from, a group by, and an order by. A lot of what you eventually end up seeing when it comes to a lot of this, it's these main 4 to 6 things. Even our smaller ones up here, notice this is just a select, from, and then a where clause. So those 6 are all over the place. The only difference between this entire thing that you're seeing here and the one that we did earlier is there's just multiple SQL queries combining together. And so but in terms of outputs that it produces and things that we end up seeing here, we have here our teacher user ID, the class ID, the class name, number of total students, number of active students, and number of responses in a given period. And so what you guys will see here is these are the types of tables and that I end up building and then sending to different members of the team in order for them to be able to look at and do with what it is they do their job. All right, you guys want to try some of this yourself? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this link into chat, and then I'm going to bring it up on my page myself. So if you guys have your own device and you want to follow along, feel free. If you guys don't have access at the moment and just want to watch, you'll see it on my screen. There's a bunch of different platforms you guys can go to in order to learn more about SQL, and we'll talk about those at the end. This is just the easy one that I was able to find that lets you actually quickly test some of this stuff out on your own. And so w3school.com/SQL, SQL exercises. And what we're going to go through, I think it's like 5 questions. It's somewhere between 3 and 5 questions that we're just going to pull up and kind of walk through how we would fill in the blank in order to be able to run this query. So I'm going to give everyone probably about 30-ish more seconds in order to kind of get up if they need to get it up. And then we'll run through it. You will get 1 point for a correct answer. Nice. All right, when you guys are getting on this page, just come down here to where it says Start SQL Exercises, and then just go ahead and select Start SQL Exercises. Notice when you go here, there's a total of 52 exercises that deal with a bunch of different types of things. We did not touch on all of these today. We in no way had enough time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of jump around to a couple different ones that we've looked at. Feel free on your own to go through all of them if you would like. They will have kind of explaining how things work when you're going through them. And then I'll also show you, give you guys a couple of different sites where you can learn certain things. So our first question here is insert the missing statement to get all columns from the customers table. What would you guys say goes here in front of the star?
Select.
Perfect. Select. Now, what you'll see is this has the from in all caps. I put the select in all caps. My favorite part of SQL is it's not case sensitive. Meaning if I were to do select in all caps, select in all lowercase, or, oh my gosh, there we go. Even jumble it up, it doesn't really matter. For simplicity, I'm going to put in all caps. But it's not case sensitive. Either way, select ends up being right. All right, let's do one more in the select and then we'll go forward. So our next one. So write a statement that will select the city column from the customers table. So we got 3 pieces of information we need here. What would you, anyone take a crack at what I would put in all 3 of these?
Select city from. Yeah, select city from
Perfect.
customers.
So we have our select and our from. From deals with the customers table, and then select is the column, in this case, city. All right, I'm gonna jump. So let's go to where next. So I'm gonna go to where exercise 1. So we want to select all records where the city column has the value Berlin. So if I'm looking here, I have select star from customers. Anyone would take a crack at what should go in these 3? Sure thing, Aaron.
Where,
Okay.
city, and Berlin. Berlin.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, an important thing to note here, when you are actually using text, that needs to go in quotations. When you're having just a number, it doesn't have to be. So if I was saying 12, I don't need the text brackets around it. But because Berlin is just a text, I actually need the quotations around it. All right, so select where. Let's go to a group by. So I want to go to group by exercise 1. So I want to list the number of customers in each country. And so this select statement has select blank of customer ID, comma, country from customers. If I want the number of customers, what word is going to go here?
Count.
Perfect, count. If I wanted the sum, I could just put sum. If I wanted the average, I could just do average, or however that would be spelled. But in this case, we want the number, so we go count. And an important thing to note on the group by. Whatever columns are present in the query that are not associated with the count, that's what goes here. So because country is our extra column, I'm going to group by country. You can group by more than one thing. If I had country, comma, state, I would group by country, comma, state. The last, let's see, did I skip one? We'll do an order by. Actually, wait, let's do one more group by, because these tend to be kind of the more complicated ones. So we want to list the number of customers in each country, ordered by the country with the most customers first. Oh, perfect. This combines both of them. So when we're looking here, we kind of already talked about, we have here our count. After from, it goes from, then where. Notice we don't have a where clause. It says nothing about where. After where then would be our group by. So what would I group by here?
Customers first, name.
So am I grouping by customers in this? What is customers? Is customers a column or is customers the table?
I think a column.
So
Maybe the-
if customers is in the from piece, this from is always going to be the table. That's good. When I was going through this at the beginning, what I forgot to mention when I was saying my background with this stuff is I got thrown in the deep end. While I was still teaching, I started my grad school program, and I was the only person that didn't come from a coding background. And so they just kind of threw me on the deep end with the rest of the class, and I spent the first 3 months drowning trying to figure all this stuff out. But one of the important things when you're going through this, the from clause always deals with the table itself. All of the other pieces deal with columns. And so generally when we go to group by, we want to look at our select and see what all is mentioned in the select. So we have the count of customer ID, we have the country. So this case, we're going to group by country. And this says order by the country with the most customers first. So if I want to order by the country with the most customers, well, the most is going to be our count. So our count of customer ID. Should I spell customer right? I did. And if I want the one with the most first, I believe that should be descending. I'm gonna be honest and straight up front. I don't really know the descending ascending difference. Whenever I do this, I always have to just pick one. And if it's right, great. And if it's not, I go with the other. So yeah. So descending goes top to bottom, ascending bottom to top. Don't judge me. No way of me knowing the difference between those two. Whenever I'm running a query, I just run order by and I'm like, that needs to be flipped. So that I change it to the descending or ascending. So hopefully going through a couple of these examples kind of helped you guys put some stuff together. Do you guys have any questions for me on the stuff we've kind of looked at today before I talk about places to go? Awesome. Well, honestly, and this is what I did to be able to get these for you guys. I just Googled SQL training sites. I knew of a couple good ones that I would recommend. There's kind of the big three, which are Code Academy, Data Camp, and oh wait, just the big two. It's just Code Academy and Data Camp are the two most popular in terms of if you guys you can create a free account and you can learn about SQL in that way. That's what I did when I was in grad school and kind of behind in terms of a lot of the stuff that was going on. I just created a Code Academy and then a Data Camp. I create two different things, and I would just train myself on it every day. I actually then it would end up working out. One of my professors ended up having assignments in Code Academy, so I was ahead of the game. But I'll put the two links in the chat. So this first one is Code Academy. And both of these, I am linking to the SQL side, but it's more than just any of your kind of data platforms that you guys go to. And then the next one is going to be Data Camp. Sorry for the long mess links. These are just the links that are there. But I'm linking to the actual SQL training, but there's other training. If you guys are either doing Python or C++ or anything in that realm, both of these sites have ways for you to practice and learn in those areas as well. My biggest advice in terms of getting into kind of this world is it takes a lot of you learning things on your own to then be able to show your future employer, I know how to do this. Both of the jobs that I ended up getting in this sphere started with me doing kind of a trial project and being like, hey, this is what I know how to do. And then based on me showing you this, you know that I can do the job. And a lot of it came from my grad school program, but some of it came from me doing a lot of stuff and learning on my own. So I know we only got a couple minutes left. Before we call it take it back over to Kelsey, does anyone have any last questions for me in terms of either data science, SQL, any of those kinds of things? Well, if anything ever comes up, you guys, I believe, are all in Slack. I'm also in Slack, so feel free. Noah, did you have a question? I saw you.
Yes, yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, what other like database websites do you use to,
So, I have used a different site at every job that I've been with, and a different site also when I was in grad school. So when it came to Quant Hub, I showed you guys Metabase. I used Power BI at FedEx. And then before that, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name now. There was a third one. I'm going to find it real quick. I can't even think of the name of it right now. It'll come to me as soon as we get off this call. But the big thing to note is every job that you're going to go to, the platform of what it looks like is almost always going to be slightly different. But the actual code that you use, whether it's SQL or Python, is going to remain the same. And so when it came to my grad school program, I touched on about, I think it was 15 different platforms in the year-long program because they said, you're going to get out there and we don't know what platform you're going to use. So we're going to hit them all a little bit, and then you're going to learn a lot more when you go on the job training. Metabase was also, I touched on 15, did not ever touch on Metabase. So Metabase was a new one that I learned about when I got with QuantUp. But so the important thing is be able to like learn your skill, know how to access things, and know how to actually use SQL. And every job you get to, the on-job training is going to be learning about their particular platform.
Okay, yeah,
But
thank
I'm about to say that's a great question, though. If there's nothing else, Kelsey, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Alan. That was really great. I learned some new stuff. You guys give a virtual round of applause. That was amazing. And actually a really good follow-up to what we heard yesterday from Megan Johnson at Alpha Insurance, who kind of talked about how, her team, they own the data, they're working behind the scenes, and they can help what she kept calling their business teams to, not just do their day-to-day tasks, but to add value. And that's a lot of what Alan does, because he's, working in the data and seeing all the numbers. He helps me, he helps other members of our K-12 education team, the corporate side of the house, our software developers. He's kind of the owner of the data and is able to not just, run reports, but also provide really valuable insight into what's going on and kind of create that dialogue that helps us do our job. So yeah, I think that's a really neat thing that you can do with SQL, right? Is you can help just your entire team. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Y'all asked some really good questions. Hope you learned some stuff. Got some good resources over in the chat, and I'll be sure to put this recording as well as some of the things that have been shared in our chat in Slack as well, so y'all can reference it later. But with that, we are finished for today. Thank y'all all for joining us, and I guess I will see you all on Monday at our Scholars Inc. So thank you guys so much. Thanks, Alan.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.